So in 2024, I went on a 64-night adventure in my GoPod micro caravan. I started in my home in Cheshire. I then travelled up to Scotland on the west side. I caught a ferry from Oban to the Outer Hebrides and then made my way up through the islands before catching a ferry back to the mainland, coming in at Ullapool. I then travelled across to the east side of Scotland, where I began to work my way south again, back into England and back to my home in Cheshire. Now, as mentioned, that was 64 nights. So it was a little over 2 months. So it was a very big adventure. So in this video, I'm going to break down everything that I paid in order to do that adventure. So we're going to look at campsites, fuel, ferries, food, etc. And then to make this video a little bit more interesting, because I vlogged the whole adventure pretty much almost every day that I was on the road for, I'm going to tell you guys how much YouTube ad revenue I made from those vlogs, and we're going to see or not if I made a profit. Okay, so let's kick things off with the campsite. This was obviously my biggest cost. Because I have a caravan and it's not the most brilliant thing off-grid, and because I needed to work as I was going, every pitch that I had an electric hookup, and where possible, I went for a hard standing pitch. I stayed at 16 campsites in total, and I stayed at each one for 4 nights before moving on to the next. So for those 64 nights, my campsite cost came to £1,803.88, and that gave me an average cost of £28.19 per night. Now, I should mention that on some campsites you had to pay extra for showers. I have included that in this cost. So if the shower was £1, for example, and I was staying for 4 nights, then I've added £4 onto that cost. There was one campsite where I had to pay for electricity separately. The electricity was metered. Again, I have included that in this cost. So for the ferries, I was travelling in my small Citroen Nemo van, which was obviously towing my GoPod micro caravan. There was just me and my dog, but I did also have a bike on the roof. And all of these things kind of add to the cost. So my biggest ferry got me from Oban on the mainland over to the Outer Hebrides, where we docked at Castle Bay on the Isle of Barra. And that ferry cost me £178.90. The next ferry I took was from Barra to the Isle of Eriskay, which got me into South Uist. That ferry cost me £28.95. The next one was from Berneray on North Uist up to Leverburg to get me to the Isle of Harris, and that was £36.55. And then the final ferry took me from Stornoway on the Isle of Lewis back to the mainland, coming in at Ullapool, and that one was £132.45. So in total, my ferry cost came to £376.85. Now, when it came to booking everything, I pre-booked all my campsites and all my ferries. So I knew exactly where I was going. I know that not everybody likes to do that. Some people like to book it as they go. But I just like to know what I'm doing. I like to have everything sussed, everything sorted, so I can then just travel from one to the next. But by doing that, there does come an element of a risk. Because what if something happens and I can't make the trip? What if I miss a ferry and then miss campsites? There's a lot of risk with that because you're not always guaranteed to be refunded from campsites, and again with ferries. So I took the added precaution of taking out travel insurance as well. Because together, the ferries and the campsites came to over £2,000. And like I said, if something happened and I couldn't go, or something interrupted the journey, that's a lot of money to lose. So I took out an Explorer travel insurance, which covered for trip cancellations, interruptions, travel delays, and also some gadget cover as well. And that cost me £62.77. So now let's talk about food. So over the 64 nights, I spent a total of £504.93. So that was an average of £7.89 per day, which does sound really good. Now, of course, I wasn't going out to any restaurants. I was mainly cooking for myself in the caravan. I went to a lot of the local shops and supermarkets. I also got a lot of like yellow sticker deals on food that was going out of date and that needed eating quickly. But I did also treat myself. It wasn't as though I didn't experience any of the food out there. So I went to a few food trucks. For example, I went to the Butty Bus. I went to the Dunes food truck, which was very nice. Had a very nice scallop and bacon roll from there. I went to a few honesty boxes. So the piece of cake honesty box was my favourite one. I had a seafood platter at the Seafood Shack. I got some ice cream whilst I was in Ullapool. I got some salmon and some pate from the Hebridean Smokehouse. So I didn't restrict myself. I think just because I cooked for myself in my caravan predominantly, I think that's why my food bill is so low. But I did treat myself and buy some of the things about and cakes. I bought a lot of cakes, especially I think I got my most favourite cakes from the Hebridean Bakehouse in Stornoway. So I did treat myself, but yeah, that was a very low food cost. But moving on. Now let's talk about fuel. So I drove a total of 1,768 miles. And that cost me the grand total of £259.04. So again, that's very low, but my van is very economical. When I'm not towing, my van gets 50 miles to the gallon. It's meant to get 60, but I've never seen 60. But then again, it is 10-year-old now. Maybe it got 60 when it rolled out the factory, but I tend to get around 50 miles per gallon when the van is empty and when I'm not towing. When the van is fully packed and when I'm pulling this caravan, although it is only a micro caravan, I only lose about 10 miles per gallon. So I'm still doing a good 40 miles per gallon when I'm towing. So it is still very economical. So again, hence why my fuel cost is very low. So that was pretty much all my costs apart from parking as well. I paid £16 in parking fees, and they were mainly when I was just going to visit places, when I was going on hikes, etc. They were mainly on the mainland. There was no parking fees I experienced in the Outer Hebrides. So that was all my costs: ferries, campsites, insurance, food, fuel and parking. So when you add all those costs together, it comes to a grand total of £3,023.47. So over a 64-night adventure, that gives me an average spend of £47.24 per day. Now, I think that's good value, especially when you're considering that my campsite costs are almost £30 per night. So I think I travelled quite cost effectively. But let me know what you think. Did you expect this cost to be higher or did you expect it to be lower? And how much do you pay when you're travelling? Obviously, if you're wild camping a lot more, your costs will probably be a lot cheaper. If you're going out to eat more than I am, maybe your costs are more expensive. Let me know what it's like for you. So that was how much I spent. Now let's talk about how much I made, because whilst I was on that adventure, I vlogged the whole thing and I created a YouTube series which lasted 52 episodes. And on top of that, I also created some of the spin-off videos, such as places to go in the Outer Hebrides, my favourite campsites, and I also did a video sharing my personal opinion on the Outer Hebrides. Now, because my channel is monetized, I get a percentage of the YouTube ad revenue, and I'm going to tell you exactly how much that was for these videos. Now, for reference, this has been recorded in June 2025, and I have a little over 18,000 subscribers. So let's start with the spin-off videos. I made 5 of those in total, not including this one. And the ad revenue for those videos as it stands today is £281.01. Now for the actual vlog series, so those 52 episodes, I was paid £6,031.34. So when you add those together, I got £6,312.15. Now, if you remember, I said that the whole adventure cost me £3,023.47. So that means that technically I made a profit of £3,288.68. So when you look at it like that, it seems pretty fantastic. I went on an adventure that I always wanted to do, and I made £3,000 whilst I was doing it. I made twice as much money than what I was able to spend on an adventure. It sounds great. But what it doesn't take into account is the amount of time it took to edit these videos and the amount of work that went into creating them. So on average, each video takes me about 2 to 3 days to put together. That's just editing. It's not me going around with the camera and filming. This is me sitting in front of my laptop working. So 2 to 3 days per video. The shorter videos that are like 15-20 minutes will take 2 days, and the longer videos, which are about 40 minutes plus, those will take 3 days. So let's say on average, each video takes me 2.5 days. As mentioned, I had 52 episodes in the vlog series, and I created 5 spin-off videos. So that means that from this adventure, I created 57 videos. Of course, not including this one, because this one at the moment is still in progress. So 57 videos with an average editing time of 2.5 days. That means that I had 142.5 days of work. Now, as we've already calculated, I made a profit of £3,288.68 on this adventure. But if you divide that by the extra 142.5 days of work, that means that I had a day rate of £23.08. And I don't know how many people would work a full day for £23. So I am self-employed, and every time I sit down at my laptop and work on my actual business that supports me, I earn more than £23 a day. So this means that every time I've took a day to work on a YouTube video, I have actually been losing money and not making money. So although you would think, yes, you made 3,000 on that trip, I actually haven't, because I've taken days out from working my actual business, which pays me more than £23 a day, and instead I've been working for this lower day rate. So yeah, when you look at it like that, you can see that it's not profitable. And especially that only just takes into account the editing time. If you were to factor in the time of actually filming it, so the time I took whilst I was on that adventure to capture footage in order to create the vlogs, it would be even less profitable. But getting £6,000 back from a £3,000 adventure is better than a kick in the teeth. And to be honest, I just like creating these videos, I like sharing my adventures, and I like making these memories for myself. So for the time being, I'm happy to continue, even though technically every time I sit down at the laptop to create one of these vlogs, I'm essentially losing money. But as long as I can keep a roof over my head and food in my belly and Winston in the lifestyle that he is currently accustomed to, then I'm okay to do that. But what do you think? Do you think this was a good return? Do you think it was a bad return? Were the figures where you thought they'd be? Were you expecting more, expecting less? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll catch you guys on the next adventure.